Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the special council meeting of Wednesday, November 5th. Meeting called to order. Thank you for joining us this evening. We've got territorial acknowledgement. Councillor Shukin.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Little. I just want to acknowledge that we are on Coast Salish territory, and just want to acknowledge that our near neighbors are the Chan First Nation and also the Sauk First Nation. And what's interesting, just in terms of my gaining awareness of the place that we live, is that Coast Salish territory covers both sides of the strait, and even the communities on the Washington State side also recognize themselves as Coast Salish people. So,
okay, thank you. Okay, we've got the agenda before you. I'll take a motion to approve. Moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Shukin. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Great. And we have time for public participation. Should anybody wish to speak this evening, you've got 4 minutes. There's a timer here that goes yellow to remind you that you have 30 seconds left. If you could state your name and your street. Thank you.
Sherry Rourke, Rocky Point Road. I'd like to begin by recognizing the exceptional work our planner has put into this report. I think she's done an incredible job of summarizing community feedback and providing council with clear options that align with provincial housing needs legislation. I did want to mention a comment I heard regarding the Abbeyfield model and the suggestion that Metchosin isn't the right place for community care facilities because we lack the services to support them. Respectfully, that's not accurate. We already have several properties operating under community care designations, including group homes for children, youth, and adults who require physical, mental health, or addiction support. These homes have existed here for decades, and they're not something the district can restrict. They are mandated under provincial law to be permitted in all residential zones. My understanding is the Abbeyfield model operates outside the community care designation, and it's been extremely successful in other communities, allowing people to age in place within a supportive social environment of their choosing. Another concern raised at the council table was that high construction costs would prevent residents from building or legalizing secondary dwellings. And the reality is that many people can afford to build or renovate in our community. Across Metchosin, we see older barns, workshops, and outbuildings converted into carriage houses and suites, as well as new homes with attached or detached suites being built. Construction costs vary widely, and renovating an existing structure may reduce costs significantly, which is precisely why many have already done it. While construction costs are a barrier to some, the real barrier isn't that. It's the cost of land and our limited availability. Legalization creates affordable, multi-generational housing options for families and ensures that existing dwellings meet basic life and safety standards. This process isn't solely about promoting new development and the provincial legislation. It's about providing an opportunity for compliance. Metchosin has an extraordinary number of non-conforming dwellings. These changes would allow many of those dwellings to be brought into compliance, and as permit data is submitted to BC Assessment, property values and therefore municipal tax revenue will naturally increase. Legalization benefits both residents and the district. From an agricultural standpoint, the report also recognizes that flexibility in housing can help farms survive. Allowing farm work or family accommodation can mean the difference between a farm that fails and one that thrives. It supports young agrarians, aging homeowners, and can revitalize underused land. It also aligns us with provincial ALC regulations, which already permit secondary dwellings on farmland under clear conditions. If that balance is acceptable to the province, it makes little sense for Metchosin to impose stricter rules. The planner also highlighted that the 15-meter setback does not achieve its intended purpose. Subdivision is already controlled through zoning and minimum lot size requirements, so this additional setback simply adds red tape and confusion and often limit the most appropriate building locations, as we've seen through previous variance requests. These changes would also allow bylaw enforcement to focus on issues that truly harm the community and create hazardous conditions. Right now, Metchosen's in a position where it can't realistically enforce some of its bylaws, and this legalization would give staff the ability to focus on genuine safety and nuisance concerns. I would encourage council to view these recommendations through the lens of inclusion, fairness, and community sustainability. Legalizing existing housing and allowing reasonable change isn't about changing who we are. It's about acknowledging what already exists and providing opportunity to support farms, families, and ensuring our bylaws reflect reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak this evening?
Good evening. My name is Brent Donaldson, Charleston Court. I'm a member of the Agricultural Committee, and when we met at our last meeting, we had some good debate and discussion, and these are some of the highlights. I can't speak for the committee, but these are some of the things that I took out of the meeting, and it was actually it was really good. We had a good cross-section. In the planner's report, it identifies tiny houses, and certainly a detached suite has no limitation on size, to my knowledge. When I hear of tiny house, I think of something on wheels. I know that's kind of a momentum that's happening in Canada and actually around the world. So I would suggest that maybe just remove tiny houses and just have it secondary suites as detached. Increasing size of suites actually doesn't benefit low-income folks. I know I have 2 adult children, and when they were living in Metchosen, the cheapest suite they could find is $1,800. And that's pretty expensive for somebody even working in government. That would certainly take up 1 paycheck or more. So I know increasing the size definitely is palatable for families, but for younger people, certainly a couple, $1,800 to $2,000 a month is quite a bit. When you get up into the 3-bedroom range, one could expect to pay between $3,000 and $4,000 a month in rent. To me, that is affordable. The Abbeyfield model, we had some discussion with that at the Agricultural Committee, and certainly 10 residents seemed a little excessive. And again, I'm not speaking for the committee, it was just an observation that I went away with. 6 seem more in keeping. We have a rooming house concept on our street, and when I was driving here this evening, there's 7 vehicles parked in the parking or on the boulevard. If you have 10 people, and assuming all are able to drive, and then you throw in the commercial aspect of it, you'll have large vehicles doing deliveries and such. So certainly I think folks need to understand that there has to be good parking, and if there's caregivers involved also, that you could easily have a dozen or more vehicles, and certainly having them parked on a street, especially in a rural community, I don't think it'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak this evening?
Good evening, Ellen Frisch, Perry Crossroad. Again, wanted to thank the planner for the significant amount of work and thought that's gone into the report. It modernizes a lot of the terminology to bring it up to date with the type of housing that is more common now and more readily available, for example, as accessory dwelling units. I just want to clarify that one of the most significant aspects is the consolidation of the various terms associated with detached secondary suite, etc. I think the previous speaker perhaps hadn't referred to tonight's documents, which paint a different story than the original report. So the proposal to now collapse those things under an accessory dwelling unit is far more common across all municipalities, and really helps clarify that both where manufactured homes and where modular homes can be utilized. Lastly, regarding the Abbeyfield model, I support it. A big part of the purpose in describing it in the way it is because other municipalities, for example, like Saanich, previously had bylaws which did not allow more than 5 people who were not related to live together. So if 6 friends wanted to get together and live together, like, and cohabitate, they couldn't do that under the Saanich model, and it went to a decision which came back for, I think it was a human rights tribunal, and said no, can't do that. So something like the Abbeyfield model I see as a fair hybrid between those two things, and there's nothing that things can be done to define parking, number of cars, uses, and that kind of thing, I think is imminently solvable. So, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak this evening?
Oh, it was red. That's why I was confused. Okay, Anne Richmond, Arden Road. I really appreciate the detailed input that other people have given, but I really wanted to thank the planner and also thank council for undertaking a really comprehensive look and consultation process to do this. I think the report reflects really the diversity of opinion and also real strong pressure for positive change. So I really welcome that you did it, and I think the report was excellent, and I'm looking forward to progress. Thanks.
Sarah at the name of Chosen Road. Yeah, this whole thing has been really exciting for me. Obviously, we've been thinking about all this stuff for a while, so it's exciting to get to talk about it, and I'm really glad at the way it's come about and the options that are getting looked at. I did want to mention a couple of things. I think, well, one thing, like the Hicks group kind of came about originally because of an interest in housing for seniors in Metchosin and being able to have people age in place here at least a little longer. I mean, obviously there does often come a time when people have to have a different level of care, but until then it is, a lot of people do want to downsize to some level from, you know, the level of large scale housing we have here where it is quite a lot to keep up with and just move into something smaller, but there's not, you know, condos here and stuff. So a model that could allow people to stay a little bit longer, I think would be very welcome for a lot of people. At least that's what we found early on, and that's why we were really interested in that. I think I'd maybe like to mention again too about the, you know, I know the tiny homes concept, so the tiny home on wheels, which it is important to separate that from just a small house and RV living. I do think like those are things that are continuing to get looked at on different levels. And I know we're not there yet provincially with the regulations, but I think it would be good to see us be ready for that because it is, you know, environmentally, financially, and many ways a good option for people to have housing that is, you know, cheaper and it can be moved so it doesn't have a long-term environmental impact on that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak this evening? Okay. Thank you, everybody, for speaking at the microphone. Your input's valued. Reports for action. So let's now move to our reports. So just as a reminder, the province has made it mandatory that local governments align their OCP and their land use bylaw with their housing needs report. And so that's what we're talking about this evening. We've gone through several discussions about this, several iterations of this document. And if I could invite our planner, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and members of the public. The purpose of the presentation tonight is to present the redlined version with track changes to Metchosen's official community plan and land use plan. These changes have been made to address the new provincial legislation for housing. It also integrates changes that respond to the public engagement phases of the project. These amendments also address local housing needs that were identified in the housing needs report, and they reflect small-scale solutions that expand housing choice in Metchosen while maintaining the rural identity, respecting the natural ecosystems, and working within our limited infrastructure capacity. This slide is just a reminder the project is being initiated to meet the provincial requirements. The province now requires us to demonstrate in the OCP how we're going to meet 20 years of projected housing needs and how municipalities plan to address all 7 or include all 7 classes of the legislative housing needs to align with the housing needs report. The proposed changes within the bylaws tonight, they aim to align the 2 bylaws with the provincial housing requirements and the findings of the housing needs reports, reflect and integrate the feedback collected during the public and stakeholder engagement in the 2 phases. And the changes also incorporate some housekeeping. There's lots of references to outdated legislation, so this has been addressed in the red line versions before you. And the last updates to maps was done in 2010. So updated maps reflecting current parcel data boundaries is currently being prepared and will be presented with the bylaws when they come forward for readings. The second phase of public engagement focused on reviewing the 5 housing policy options that Council looked at on October 6th. The second phase of engagement included an open house, as well as initiating an early referral process to stakeholders. Approximately 30 people attended the open house, and there was a lot of support for the 5 housing policy options. We also received a number of written submissions from the public and stakeholders, and these have been included within the package, the staff report. And overall, there's policy support, but there has been some concerns presented around the temporary use permit areas, as well as some questions around legalization of suites. The proposed changes to Part 1 in the OCP, with the exception of the changes proposed to the definitions section, these are mandatory technical changes that were added. A note that since the last council meeting, through stakeholder engagement, planning has confirmed with the Capital Regional District that the district does not need to update their regional context statement. And that's because these proposed changes will not have a drastic impact on the development and the growth concept for Metchosen in relation to the region. In other words, they're very relatively minor changes. And the CRD, they noted that there are numerous other municipalities who have opted to not update their regional context statement this year with these OCP updates to incorporate provincial legislation. Typically, an update to a regional context statement happens when it is statutorily required, which is usually following a regional growth strategy update, or if changes proposed were to have a significant impact on the growth concept for Metchosen. The proposed changes to Part 3 and Part 6 of the OCP, these have been included to address, or Part 6, sorry, have been included to address legislative housing needs, such as communal seniors housing, carriage housing. These are all aiming to address the housing policy options. And with regards to Part 3, with the exception of the temporary use permit areas, the intention here was to make changes that brought the OCP in line with the Agricultural Land Commission regulations. The proposed changes to the land use bylaw, these aim to implement the housing policy options by adding regulations. These were to align housing with the Agricultural Land Commission Act, that was Housing Policy Option 1, to permit carriage houses, to permit communal seniors housing, to small homes, which is what we were referring to as tiny homes. Small homes are already permitted, as was brought up in the public comments earlier. There is no minimum floor area required for dwellings in the land use bylaw, so small homes are permitted under a detached suite or principal dwelling. Small homes are a residential structure like any other dwelling under the BC Building Code and Part 9. And so these weren't included specifically into the changes, just because they are considered a dwelling and there's no minimum floor area. And a definition wasn't added. I felt that this could complicate the bylaw at this time, since small homes are no different than a regular home except for the size. Changes also are to address the increased permitted floor areas for detached secondary suites and secondary suites. Also, changes to the land use bylaw were to ensure consistency with Agricultural Land Commission housing regulations. There's a few outdated regulations currently that were pre-2019 when the Agricultural Land Commission made their changes. Also, some housekeeping to correct outdated legislation references, and then some clarification and addition of definitions to kind of bring everything together, modernize the bylaw, and yeah, that's about that. I thought I'd just highlight carriage houses for this slide. Carriage houses are a new type of housing that's being introduced, so there's quite a few new regulations that are being added to the land use bylaw. So changes are talking about where carriage houses can go. So here we're defining it as above an accessory building. So it can't be a standalone building, as that is a detached suite. And we're providing some clarification on, shared entryways or mechanical storage rooms can accommodate the ground floor, but essentially there's no living spaces that are on the ground floor. We're talking about, we had regulations about size limits and other definitions. So we had parking, we clarify home business, and setbacks. Basically, they're the same for detached secondary suites, maintaining the 15-meter setback between the principal dwelling. So there's quite a few new regulations, and there may need to be some tweaks and changes to these draft amendments to ensure that the intent of the regulations are clear and that they're user-friendly, which is why these are before council tonight, and why they will be going to be reviewed by legal counsel as well prior to initiating the formal bylaw approval process. The second major housing type that's being added into the land use bylaw is communal seniors housing. These regulations provide direction on where it can be built, on the building design, residence and occupancy, as well as other regulations such as sewerage, ownership and operation, building code requirements, setbacks, parking and fire access, and also clarifying home business. And all these are added just to ensure that it's maintaining a scale that is fitting with a rural Metchosin and also, you know, protecting groundwater by requiring the property to be on CRD water, etc. So tonight is looking to council for questions, also to provide direction on any revisions or changes. And the next steps after tonight would be a legal review of the draft amendments that staff will do with the lawyer, just to make sure that things are clear and user friendly, and that there's no ambiguity. And then, yeah, the next steps after that will be to present draft bylaws for consideration of first and second reading and move through the statutory referral process. There's a few agencies that have not responded yet, such as the Agricultural Land Commission. But I have touched base with them, and they're hoping to have comments back before the end of November. And yeah, this is the recommendation for tonight. That concludes my presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, and many compliments, not only from the public, as you heard tonight, but also from council. Very well done. Thank you for your reports and for the well done on the public engagement. Okay, council, you probably have some questions. Yeah, Councillor Shukin.
Mayor Little, I wonder if we might ask Ms. Johnson questions about the OCP first, and then move to the land use bylaw. Is that
Yeah, that's
something
fine.
we might? Yeah, okay. Or even, and I have to confess, I have a few wordsmithy things that I might throw at Ms. Johnson just for,
Okay.
yeah, particularly around the OCP. So
We're going to do the OCP first. So that's page 29 of the agenda.
So through you, Mayor Little, Ms. Johnson, thank you very much for all the work, and I think it's been a brilliant set of actions by yourself to keep us on track, to inform people about what the changes are, to collect input, and to have this at the table on a regular basis. So thank you very much. And again, as you mentioned, this is all driven by provincial requirement, and especially the methodology that went into the housing needs assessment was like provincial methodology and all that. So, and funny thing, I feel like we've gone through a series of shocks around this whole thing, because I remember when the legislation came out, I was talking to another councillor and he said, wow, you guys are subject to the small, the multi-unit housing requirement. And I was like, what? And then you go to the legislation and it says water or municipal sewer, and we couldn't figure out if it was one or the other. So again, we've settled down, and 852 was another shock. So anyways, thank you for guiding us through this. So just a few quick things. I just want to mention section 1.5 in the OCP, that the last line before the graph talks about the average is not expected to decline significantly over the next 20-year period. I wonder if the word increase is better than decline. It might be more accurately stated. It's 1.5 on page 36 of the package. I'm supportive of the changes to bring in the interim housing needs like tables and whatnot. I think that's what we have to do. Interesting to see your growth projections as well on page 39. That was interesting to see from the initial housing needs report. And I just want to go, I don't have too many things, but I just want to flip through really quickly to a few I do have. And sorry, a wordsmithy thing too. While we have the OCP open and you're going through and doing some cosmetic changes, section 213, if you look at it, district is capitalized all the way through. And it looks like it's almost just like a template or a stock thing, and just maybe if we uncapitalize the whole word, easy to correct and make it seem like it's a real thing that we've thought about, sort of. I noticed you made some changes to the introduction of the agricultural section. The sections are all there from the old one, as I see, just reordered a little bit, and I think it works quite well. And just one or two more. Manufactured homes. I have to confess something. And members of the audience who are quite learned in all of this are going to be aghast at this. I'm a little unclear about the difference between manufactured homes and modular homes. And I noticed you've got definitions in the land use bylaw, and you've also, in the agricultural zone, you've struck mobile home and you've talked about accessory, or I forget what it is now, alternative. Yeah, could you clarify that for me?
Through the chair, it is confusing.
Okay.
And it comes down to standards. So a manufactured home is built to a CSA Z240 standard. That's a very specific building standard. And it's a modular home is built to a CSA A277. So a modular can be pieced together and like off-site, or it can be brought in pieces to the site and pieced together. It's I would look to, there's someone in the audience who's very knowledgeable on the differences between these two, and if it's possible for her to explain it to you, I could step aside.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay.
Ellen,
So bang on. The only difference is that A277 is built to the BC Building Code, and manufacturers must undergo a third-party certification process that they are building to the BC Building Code, all aspects of it. So when a permit application is submitted for that building, the A277, you know it meets the BC Building Code, which the district has the authority to issue building permits over, and that the facility has the certification to build it correctly. And the big difference being is that the building inspector no longer conducts on-site inspections of the building. The only responsibility the building inspector has is whether the site has been prepared and the review of the foundation itself. The building is then brought in or erected on the site, and then the building inspector can do a final inspection, and then certification is issued. And manufactured homes tend to be, they're built under a slightly different code that does not align with the BC Building Code, but is a lighter weight type of vehicle, which provides different materials, and it typically is built as an entire structure and then brought to a site, and they typically are narrower so that they can fit within the roads, so maximum of 10.5 feet. So, thanks.
any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Shukin.
Ms. Johnson was right. Ms. Fritsch knows a fair bit, sounds like, about this stuff. I do have one further question about in the OCP, but I need a moment to collect my thoughts. I don't know if Councillor Gray.
Councillor Gray, do you have any questions
Thank you.
specifically about the OCP?
I was looking earlier at the policy options section of the document, so I did have some questions. So I guess they relate to either the land use or the OCP.
Okay, go ahead.
I was wondering, I guess I'm, thanks very much for all the work. Yeah, it's been great and appreciate it. Looking at the first policy option, which was line housing with the agricultural land reserve use regulation. And I'm reflecting on what the Agricultural Advisory Select Committee has provided us. And they make the point in their notes that the district should adopt the home plate rules to do with agricultural land reserve. And I'm wondering if this might be a situation, like the sequencing is kind of off. If we approve the change as proposed, and we haven't done the home plate work, then we may see houses being built that aren't adhering to the home plate. And so I'm wondering if there may be I don't want to say a trick, but a trick that we can do where we reference this and get it ready, but get that home plate work done before we actually implement these land use bylaw changes, so that we meet the general thrust of what the Agricultural Advisory Committee is suggesting.
Through the chair. Yeah, the home plate is been directed from council to staff to prepare a report on, and the planning's response to the chair of the Ag Committee was that at this time the proposed changes to the OCP and the land use bylaw, they're affecting the accessory residential units, and it's proposed that the existing 15-meter maximum distance between the principal dwelling and the detached dwelling, which would be the detached suite or the carriage house, is currently a sufficient clustering requirement to ensure that the accessory residential unit does not get built, on the other side of the property. Proposed wording has also been added to ensure that these accessory units are not strata titled, to ensure that they remain accessory, establishing the home plate at this time, as we noted earlier, was outside of the housing focused project scope, and these will be brought forward in the new year. But I think that report is imminent, and it affects more than just the accessory building. It's affecting like the location of the principal dwelling and all those things that waiting to align with the ALC for accessory units. I'm going to leave that up to council's decision, but I just want to point out that we do have a 15-meter distance between units right now, and we likely might not see a lot of uptake in terms of brand new lots that are undeveloped coming in and putting in a new dwelling and a suite. That you might just see a trickling effect of people coming in to add that second suite within an existing house, or add that new detached suite, whether it's like over an existing garage that's within 15 meters of their house. You're going to be seeing a lot of situations of existing dwellings already constructed. So I'm not sure if waiting for home plate is crucial.
Well, maybe through the chair. My concern really would be that, say we did the home plate, take a look at that 3 years from now, then lots could happen in terms of principal dwellings and everything. So if it's coming in the new year soon, then that allays my concern. It's just the idea, if we set this all up and then we don't get to it for 5 years or something, we won't actually be meeting the ALCs. I when I look at what the ALC is doing, it's a package. And we're just taking a little bit of it, but we're loosening things up to create more dwellings. It makes me think, gee, we better get that faceplate work done as soon as we can. Sounds like that's where we're headed quite soon.
Through the chair, it's on the planner's list, and it will be in the new year.
Great, thank you. I think that's those, unless others have the same concern or is more worrisome.
Nope, that's fine.
The other question I had maybe about that would be about the same issue is, the big prevailing concern we've had in Metchosin. By the way, the home plate came up a long time ago. That's why I'm concerned about it or thinking about it. And that's not a criticism, just the reality of all the other work that's going on. The other question I had was in relation to water. And water is going to come up. It comes up in the documents in various places. And Councillor Shukin some time ago was suggesting that we make some changes. I think it's in subdivision bylaw around proof of water. And so we haven't seen that either. And so I'm just concerned that we may, again, push forward with more housing, but not have dealt with the proof of water question. And people may be testing the water in the time of year where there's lots of water, but in other times of the year, not so much. Do you have any idea how far away that work is? And it may not be on your desk, I'm not just sure.
Through the chair, when somebody is coming in for adding in a detached accessory dwelling on an existing lot, proof of services happens through the building permit process. In terms of if there's a subdivision to come in and they're creating one lot or new lot or two or three, then yeah, it's the subdivision bylaw that talks about proof of servicing. So to answer your question about the subdivision bylaw, I don't have an answer for you on that. But there is still proof of servicing that is required at the building permit stage.
Right, and I guess so maybe it's a caution, council can talk about it in a minute, but my concern there is there was a huge interest in the question of water, and I think that still exists. And so as we provide more opportunity for housing, we need to remember that we've got that issue still, and we're not satisfied, I don't think, with where we're at with it. So it comes at us in a way that makes it difficult to say, well, let's do all of this, when we think, wait a minute, we have an override question, which is about proof of water, and we're not clear. I think there were some idea that we might speak to the approving officer about that, but I think council backed away from that idea of saying, hey, we have this concern, would you please, as you're working through. And I think that in the subdivision bylaw, it says at the engineer's discretion, and the idea was we might say, well, could you please be careful when you're using your discretion to test the water at a certain time of year. We weren't successful in reaching agreement on that. So it's an outstanding question that I've got.
Yeah, I just wanted to, you mentioned that before we push forward with new housing. So I don't want it out there that council's pushing forward with new housing. What this is about is we're aligning our OCP and the land use bylaw with the housing needs report using the metrics provided by and the calculator provided by the province. So we're not pushing forward with new housing. We're the district of Metchosin is not doing that. We're using the calculator, the metrics of the province to reassess the housing needs in Metchosin.
Sure, perhaps I should clarify what I'm saying is that I think I could read from the documents, but what we're doing is creating more diversity of options, expanding housing diversity, and I believe the thinking behind this is that will mean there will be more houses built. Whether or not they are is a different question. So yeah. I sort of disagree with you. I think part of what we're doing here is at the moment it's not possible to build some of the options here, and I see us moving forward to say we're going to allow those options to exist, which means that there's more opportunities to build here. I take your point. We're not pushing it. We're creating opportunities for the capacity. We don't have targets to reach. But I'm just anxious that as we do that and create these new rules, which many of them I'm in favor of, I just want to be sure we don't cross purposes with our concern about water supply, for example, or we don't cross purposes with our Ag Committee recommendations around damaging agricultural land.
Ms. Johnson.
Through the chair, we can always add more language into the zoning bylaw around proof of servicing. There is some information notes that have been added, but we can also look at adding more language around that. If that's something that you would like to see.
Yeah, Councillor Shukin.
Thank you, Mayor Little. I think that one of the answers to this is a proof of water policy, which is much easier to do and put forward and get into the system than it would be a bylaw. I mentioned that kind of when we started this, and there was a desire to do the bylaw, but of course that is much more complicated. I think it might be something that we should revisit in the new year.
Yeah.
So
I think I remember my conversation was along the lines of a bylaw has more teeth. A policy is something that we could do, but a bylaw is a bylaw, and you need to follow the bylaw. So, Ms. Johnson, I had a question. Similarly, if we wanted to add language or we wanted to, in the future, make changes. For instance, there is, as the public has noted, a progression on embracing the tiny home on wheel or on a frame. And once, and I suspect this will happen at some point, once they will be CSA certified, meet the building code, we can go back and change our bylaw, right? And it would not be recommendable to do that right now, but we certainly have that option to change our zoning bylaw in the future.
Yes, in the future, we can bring forward a staff report with changes for the land use bylaw for acknowledging those types of new dwellings. Okay. Yeah, and it would go through the legislative process.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Shukin.
thank you, Mayor Little. The one of the options that I thought was quite creative that you brought into the OCP was the concept of a TUP for farm housing, housing for farm workers. I do notice that the Machosen Foundation has spoken out against this, and quite compellingly, the Agricultural Committee has spoken out against this as well. I am personally, it was an interesting idea, but I'm not personally stuck on it. And I have some misgivings about TUPs. As much as you can have conditions put on them, I believe that there's opportunities for slippage often. So can I ask though, in terms of that, where does that fit in terms of meeting our provincial the requirements to meet the 6 or 7 elements of housing need that we have to?
And through the chair, developing or exploring the idea of a temporary use permit area for farm worker housing was more for addressing the local housing need that came up during the public engagement process. It's not directly tied to the provincial classes of housing need, but it was more of something that came out of the public engagement process that we flagged to explore. As well, it was noted in the agricultural plan. So this was back in the very first report to council. It was something that was added on in addition to the provincial housing needs to explore. So it was farm worker housing and short-term rental. And through the public engagement process, the council set aside the short-term rental, and we just stayed the course with farm worker housing to go to the second round of engagement. But exploring a temporary use permit for farm worker housing can happen anytime. Council can bring it up another time. It's not critical to the provincial housing requirements, but it is a need that has come up.
Okay.
Councillor Shukin.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor Little. So what in terms of implementing this right now, I think you're making a recommendation that it go into the OCP. Okay, and that's it. I don't think it goes into the land use bylaw.
No,
Or- yeah.
yeah, through the chair, it was a housing policy option that was just in the OCP at this time because it's exploring. It's very high level. There's a lot of steps that would have to happen after the fact. So this was just more to address the local need in a way of putting it into the OCP as a high level. But yeah, that's why you don't see it at any land use bylaw regulation changes on that.
Okay, Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I'm with Councillor Shukin on this. I would tend to knock it out now. I don't see the utility of continuing with that particular option, given, as you say, a lot of steps, a lot of work, and I don't see it ending up in a productive end. And with the Agriculture Committee saying they don't support it, and they go on to say a majority of rentals on farmland are not to farm workers, so I'd remove it at this stage, because we've got the other one that we can do. And I believe if I got it right, this is for a fourth house as well. The TUPs are for the fourth house on the property. And as somebody here had responded saying, our farms aren't like in the lower mainland. You know, we've got small operations, and having 4 houses per property doesn't really strike me as the best idea.
Ms. Johnson.
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, with making changes to align with the Agricultural Land Commission and adding that second house would be providing a need, and maybe it's something that District Machosen goes in steps, and so we implement the first housing policy option, which is to align and see how things go, and reassess the need for a fourth housing through temporary use permits.
Okay, Councillor Gray.
If we move along, then the next policy one that I was interested in commenting about was the Abbeyfield House. I'm a big supporter of this idea, and I appreciate the input we got from the audience tonight. I think the two issues that were identified, well, the one issue identified about parking, and so when I looked at the, I'm not sure if I caught what we're doing on that in terms of the land use bylaw, but I think it's important. If there's 12 people living there who are living independently, they may well have a vehicle each. So we need to be sure that when we move to authorize these things, that we have the parking available. Now, if we were in the city, I might have a different point of view, but because we're out here and we've talked about it in terms of our transportation sort of circumstance and for people, it seems an important point to make sure we address, so that that's adequate. The other thought that I was having was I think the language is something to the effect of, in all zones, except those requirement for water. Maybe the other thing that we should do with the Abbeyfield House is put them on a transit line. So we know that part of the requirements is to address transit and transportation, and so perhaps the Abbeyfield House would be best located on a transit line.
I think that might be quite restrictive.
Yes, I don't think we're going to see many built in Machosen, but the opportunity to do it means that would cover the downtown core. It covers all the way out to Beecher Bay and all the way out into town here.
Yeah.
And all of our the major roads we have transit on. And I guess we're thinking about people as they're older. So the way things usually work is that people start coming in to see the doctor at a certain point, and there's a requirement for a review of licenses at 80 years old. And then if your license is taken away, it changes everything. If you're on a transit line, then you have a chance to continue being where you live and aging in place. Mm-hmm. That's a personal decision, obviously, but I'm just thinking about how we set this up. Let's set up for success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just thinking of Arden Road, for instance, so that's not, there's transit doesn't go down Arden Road, but there is water on that road, and there are properties that may be amenable to Abbeyfield type housing there. I think, I don't think I would be in favor of that. What do you think, Ms. Johnson, about limiting it to only those that have transit?
Through the chair, I think that could be a little restrictive, and it could limit where they could develop. I think with the communal seniors housing model, it's important to remember that these are independent seniors who do not require medical or personal or institutional care, but they're also living together as a group and communal living. So if there isn't, it doesn't happen to be a transit running by the property, there are other people living in the house that could drive a member somewhere or family. I'm just I'm not. That would, if there was a transit route, that would basically be along Machosen Road and
William
Rocky
Head.
Point and William Head.
Rocky Point
Yeah.
to yeah.
All the way to Pearson College,
Mhm.
Happy Valley, all the way to Langford. These
Mhm.
are all the major routes.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's something just to mention, put on the table. We may hear in the public hearing about that as well. Yeah, I'm thinking about, having been involved lots in medical care, what happens is that people age and they want to age in place. What moves people to town here is loss of their license, not ability to drive. And so the idea of facilitating a circumstance where people can continue to live here and age further in place, transit becomes something handy for people. So I'm just putting out as an idea, something to consider if we're looking for success. Of course, a developer, a person who builds, openly may well choose to be on a transit line just for the idea that that's what makes sense for these kinds of situations.
Although in Machosen, we did have a group that was interested in this very concept, and it wasn't that they were losing their licenses; they were forward thinking, in their late 60s, and they did come to talk to the planner at the time, and they only identified, I think, 2 sites or maybe even one in Machosen where they could move, but they had a perfectly suitable place that they all agreed that they would like to move to, but it wasn't due to it might have due to medical issues, but it was due to aging, but it wasn't due to losing their license. They were just progressive thinking, and all over the world. Denmark, for instance, has these type of facilities. I'm not in favor of restricting them.
Denmark, of course, has fabulous public transit. We're striving to deliver here in Victoria too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I just want to, was there any more questions about aligning the housing with the Agricultural Land Commission? Was there? Go ahead.
Oh, I do have a question or a thought on the Abbeyfield
Sure.
thing. I'm not in favor of restricting it to transit served corridors. And I recognize the concern about parking, but that is a requirement in section 49 of the land use bylaw. If people, I would assume that if a proponent comes and they think they can get away with, sorry, wrong term, they can have 8 stalls or can only have 8 stalls for what they have. Maybe a variance might be possible, but the key thing is it's the limitation in the land use bylaw is up to 10. So it's likely we may see none, we may see 1 to 10, we may see 6 or something like that. But parking is baked in as a requirement. And I mean, if we wanted to, I see the sense of maybe, a preference being given to areas that are served by transit. And maybe that could be put into the OCP. Maybe, I'm not quite sure where it would go. But I don't support limiting it simply from that. So I'm prepared to stick with what's here. So,
Okay.
And again, it's defined in section 24 of the land use bylaw, and then parking is section 49. So just,
Okay. Okay, so with, I was just going through on page 5. Okay, so any more comments for Ms. Johnson regarding the alignment with ALC? Was there,
and back to what Councillor Gray was saying about the home plate, I was thinking the very same thing as I was reading this, and it would be great to have that. I don't think we should hold up anything in terms of what's here, but move as expeditiously as we can. So.
yeah, we do have a deadline for the end of the year for these, to responding to the provincial legislation, right? Yeah, okay. Okay, then with the permit, more housing types, housing policy option 3, are there any comments regarding this? Expanding housing diversity, go ahead.
Just had a single question through the chair. Did we ask CERC particularly to comment about, that's the seniors resource center?
Yeah, through the chair, they were sent a invitation to participate.
Thank you.
And you also did public engagement there as well, in person, right? Okay. I had a question about carriage houses, and I don't know the answer to this. So many of the carriage houses are built over a 2-car garage. So does the requirements, I think 90 meters squared, is that about 2-car garages plus a little bit? Or are we, I'm just asking a practical question.
Through the chair, through their design building plans, the habitable floor area is 90 square meters for a carriage house. So if it's going over top of a 2-door garage, they have to design it so that the habitable space is not covering, or it doesn't exceed the 90 square meters. I'm not sure if
Is that practical?
I don't know, but this is something that the owner and the designer would work with a building designer on. And there's a lot of different creative designs that can happen to achieve what they need. Yeah. I don't have a solid answer for you on that one. We just have to be clear in our regulations about what is allowed, and so if it's something that's not achievable, then they'll have to look at an alternative solution.
Okay. Councillor Shukin.
Just going back to the matter of the TUPs for farm worker housing, my sense is that we should remove it. And I will just note that right now it is simply only in the OCP, as council may explore. And if somebody did want to bring it forward, I don't think there's any limitations on them doing it, but they would have to come to us with a good rationale, and that might actually kick the ball and inspire. But I do see the point, and it's interesting to hear from the Ag Committee on this. And again, if it's only in the OCP, I think that's maybe not appropriate for us to bring forward right at this moment. And I don't see it really, I think Ms. Johnson has said it doesn't really help us with meeting the provincial requirements as well. So.
Yeah, I have concerns regarding the practicality of the TUP being 3 years and then another renewal. You put that investment for 3 years and then maybe another 3 years, and then I think that would be a deterrent to me anyways. It doesn't seem very practical or even fair to set up those expectations. So yeah, I wouldn't be in favor of that either. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So anything else regarding carriage houses? Any other questions? Thanks for adding the definition, providing clarity. I should have asked a builder actually that question regarding the 2 car garage.
Through the chair, there's many municipalities, after putting in a new housing type in their bylaw, they will put out an information bulletin about the new housing type, and within that bulletin, they often provide visuals, so that might be helpful too, to show how a carriage house could be accommodated over different types of buildings. Just an example, but
Okay. Okay, anything, any comments regarding small houses? Or small homes, sorry, small homes. Secondary suites, detached secondary suites, or communal seniors, housing? Any of that? No?
I don't have a question, but I'm just reflecting on some comments we heard earlier and has been mentioned in other meetings. I'm not sure what we're solving by making the secondary suites larger. I hear again and again, and I read the news and talk to people, and affordability is the issue. The larger the suites are, the more expensive they become. So I feel like, again, working at cross purposes to our goals. I understand the notion of multi-generational families, but I see that working under the current arrangements. Also remembering that a large number of people said they didn't really want to see much changed to these rules. So I'm more tending to think about the 90 square meters in the detached suites, but I'm not convinced that they require the idea of 3-bedroom. I guess we're not going to be using detached suites, but the attached suites is as positive a move, just given affordability problems.
Yeah. Ms. Johnson?
through the chair, the district's housing needs report has a specific need for rental housing for 2 and 3 bedroom. And so since rental housing in Metchosin is in the form of suites, for the most part, the secondary rental market, the increasing the size of a secondary suite to 120 square meters allows for that 3rd bedroom, or it could also be 2 bedroom with an office, working from home. But in the planner's opinion, increasing the size of a secondary suite is not anticipated to impact the built form or the form and character of the overall dwelling. It would still retain the appearance of the principal dwelling. And the land use bylaw would still be regulating the maximum floor area. It would be regulating the setbacks, the density, the lot coverage, all that would still remain. But it would allow an opportunity for that extra bedroom for whatever purposes, rental or special needs or family. So it just gives that other housing choice to Metchosin.
But
That's great.
I think we're also seeing that more and more houses are being rented are the principal dwellings. So there are, in fact, principal dwellings that are available for rental for families. Anyway, that's just my concern. I'm just voicing it again. If we make everything unaffordable, then we'll be back here saying, oh, golly, what do we do now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we did look at an application that was denied. That the regulations regarding the size was a real issue for them. So they didn't want to move into something that size, and that's why they opted to try and subdivide their property and build at the other end. Unfortunately, that was denied. But I've heard more and more that people would like to have their families with them, and those families often involve children, and so that the size restriction is very difficult for families. Yeah, and remind me again. So in the housing needs report, there is a need for those rental options with 2 and 3 bedrooms. So that's within the calculator. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Shukin.
Mayor Little, I also support the increase in size in both secondary suite and detached secondary suites as well. So
Okay. Okay. Anything else about the housing options, or if you, in the public engagement, was there any questions for Ms. Johnson regarding what was heard with the October 16th open house in particular? Yeah, Councillor Gray.
Well, just to make a comment perhaps about the issue of the illegal suites. And I think I get the sense of real hope by people about what might be done there. But I think as we talked about before, I like the idea of a bulletin to let people know what's possible. But I'm myself not expecting a big rush to suddenly have a lot of people coming forward. So we'll see how it goes. But I don't want people to be overly disappointed when they find out that actually not many people come forward and we're still back to our similar situation, which is we don't have a big capacity for enforcement. You know, the idea of getting tax revenues and all that, it's just, that's a different problem. And I'm afraid people were putting together with a big hope here. I'm just not sure that's what we'll see. Just a comment. Nobody has to agree or disagree with me. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, Ms. Johnson, perhaps you could go over the suggestions for including the educational component with the number 5 here. What this discussion was up till now.
Yeah, through the chair. It was through public engagement that this was brought to the attention of the legalization of suites was a common topic that came about, and understanding that the legalization of suites can be a very big process. It was looked at how can we address it in the OCP at this point, in the sense of voluntary legalization. So what can we do? And so that's why the providing education, a homeowner's guide or on how to legalize would be helpful as the great first start, because right now there is none. And so when people come forward wanting to legalize, they're sort of getting different answers in regards to what it entails. So this was seen as a first step to addressing this topic that has come up. And yeah, that's in terms of addressing it further, that could maybe be a separate discussion outside of the housing update.
Councillor Shukin.
One of the things that I think this may fall under in time is ensuring that we have as much tax fairness as possible in the district. This comes up, of course, with illegal suites because you have a higher value of property if you have a place where you can rent and earn income. And if it's not reported, that raises the question about fairness as well. Leads into questions about businesses operating on properties. There's questions about farm tax status as well. So we might, or future councils might dig into this in terms of that question, and maybe being actually more assertive in terms of making sure that if you have one of these suites, you are being assessed properly. So.
Okay. Did anybody have any comments regarding the redlined version regarding zones? So agriculture, uplands, rural, residential. Is there any questions there or comments, concerns?
Yeah, I had one question that came up in a couple of places, and I think you dealt with it through the chair. The idea that if people proceed with any of the different housing options, that the use of the house wouldn't include commercial purposes, or the dwelling wouldn't include commercial purposes. And the other was a concern that we heard at the open house that I think it was to do with the Abbey Field, that it could maybe change or get switched to some other group home type purpose that perhaps wasn't meeting the seniors' needs. But I think you dealt with that. Is that fair? Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else specific that you flagged? Councillor Shukin.
Well, I had a question. Mentioned earlier that Saanich had a rule in place of a limit of 6 unrelated people living together in the same dwelling. We have no limits like that in Metchosin. I was a bit confused when I was reading about family, the definition of a family and that sort of thing. But do we have any limits, or do we create limits by the work that's being done here to have people who are unrelated living together in a house?
Through the chair, the definition of family talks about the limit. So let's go look at the definition.
Oh, yes, page 134. So I saw the reference there to family, but I wondered where it turns up elsewhere in terms of what's permitted. Because in the other places, I'm just seeing the notion of one dwelling per property, one dwelling in the accessory buildings.
So the word family would show up in it should all be connected.
Yeah.
So I can double make sure of that, because there's the definition of dwelling unit, definition of family, and this is why in the definition of family it was communal seniors housing, community care facility was specifically excluded because it has their own definitions. So yeah, no, it should all be reflecting the same thing. So I can double check that.
Yeah, I just didn't see how it doubled back and how that worked. But I could see what we were doing in terms of the Abbeyfield homes.
Okay. Anything? Go ahead.
I had the identical question, wondering, do we need it? And if we do, where else does it show up? So, but yeah.
Okay. Councillor Gray.
I saw the question on page 154. I think you're asking yourself, it was about manufactured homes on a property. That'd be something that would go to the lawyers, I guess? Yeah, great, thanks.
Any other questions?
Certainly, through the chair, a number of places, Ms. Johnson, you've made these information out. It's a bit difficult to read with the light here, but it had to do with the ALC.
What page are you referring to?
It's on a number of different pages. This one's on 179. I'm sorry, I can't quite see it in the light. Oh, it's a note explaining that the Agricultural Land Commissioner will be involved when people are making some of the, creating some of the housing options. And I wonder, does that go into the land use bylaw at a certain point? Or that's in the land use bylaw, but does it become, is it law or?
Yeah, through the chair, that one is. And so this is a helpful information note, because when residents are coming in for a building permit for the principal dwelling on ALR land, it's not always top of mind that there's actually a size limit to the house. And so by having it in the land use bylaw, it's a little bit more clear.
So it's simply an information note. There's another piece of law that's going to affect what you're doing.
Yeah, it's the ALC legislation.
Great. Okay, thanks. And I think it might be the last question I had was on page 186. And I'm not sure about this, uplands zone. And what it says about density is it says there shall not be more than 2 principal dwelling units per lot. And wouldn't that properly read more than 1 principal dwelling unit?
Through the chair, thank you for catching a typo.
Great.
Thank you. Oh, no, it's not. There shall not be more than 2.
There's 2 lots, as I understand it, that are Upland 1 and only 2 lots. Yeah. So and they're known as the duplexes. Yeah, and I think those are the only ones. So it caught me too, and then it was like, that's right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, so next steps. We've got some recommendations here back on page 3, right at the beginning of the Miss Johnson's report. Does anybody want to move the motion? Go ahead.
Very little. I'm happy to move the motion. Although I think that what we really need is the first line and the second line, because what we've been doing is providing the direction to staff regarding any revisions. So I think Ms. Johnson has that. Key thing I think being is we want the TUP thing removed from the OCP amendment. Yeah, but
Yeah.
So I don't think we need to make the middle thing. Yeah, but
A revision would be the TUP.
Through the
Yes.
chair, yeah, it would be helpful if that
just make it.
is made in
Okay. Well, sure.
that
I-
one. Removing the TUP portion from the
Okay.
bylaw amendment.
Yep,
So
so
put
let's
that into
go the recommendations and then add in the removal of the TUP portion.
Okay. Well, can I just make the motion as presented? So moved. Is that okay?
Okay, and we're all clear what, I'd like you to read it in,
Okay, sure.
because members of the audience do not all
Okay.
have this before them. They're wondering what we're voting on, so.
Okay, sounds good. I move that council receive the redlined draft amendments to the District of Machosen Official Community Plan and Land Use Bylaw, and that council provide direction to staff regarding any revisions or changes to the draft amendments as identified by council. Can I add specifically the removal of the temporary commercial use permit for farm workers? Temporary use permit. And further, that council directs staff to initiate the formal bylaw approval process following review of the revised draft amendments by the district's legal counsel. So
This is moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Gray. More comment?
With thanks to the planner and all the public who've been involved.
Indeed. Okay, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you all. On the agenda, we don't have any public questions. However, I will entertain any questions, any concerns the public might have at this point. One or two questions would be tolerable. Sarah, come on.
Sarah, Anthony Machosen Road. So this would be, I think, directed at the planner. You did ask the question about how it would work later on for if we did want to open up the tiny home question again. And I just wanted clarification about one thing, because the planner did say that, yes, that was possible. Would it require opening up the OCP though and going through the public consultation again, or is it just a matter of bylaw change after that?
Go ahead, Ms. Johnson.
Through the chair, no, it wouldn't require amending the OCP because there's language, OCP policies in place that are supporting a diversity and range of housing. So it would just be a matter of opening up the land use bylaw.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to, some clarification on the 2-bay garages. A lot of times those are 20 by 20 or 24 by 24, so you're talking 400 to 576 square feet. in cases where that two-bay garage is larger than, say, 90 square meters, what happens as a builder is you wall space off. And so the secondary dwelling would meet that 90 cubic meter requirement. I'm not sure if it was in the bylaw or the regulations to allow a secondary usage. In other communities, you can often use that room for storage or another purpose. Our bylaw in Metchosin currently restricts that. So if there's an accessory building that someone's going to live in, they cannot if it also has another use. So that may need to be changed. And then our current bylaws do restrict boarding houses to 4 persons. So I think, again, in my opinion, that's one of those unenforceable bylaws because, you know, there are many houses in Metchosin where you have more than 4 unrelated people living together.
Okay, say it again, what those dimensions of the
garage, they start at, I mean, 20 by 20 or 24 by 24, and they get bigger depending on someone's definition of a 2-car garage and how much space they want. So in the chance that you have there are quite a few large garages, and so if someone wants to put a carriage house above a large garage, what you would do is just, as the designer or the builder, you would restrict the living space to that 90 square meters, and then the remaining space in other jurisdictions can be used as storage, but it would have to be written into your bylaw that that building can have multiple uses, because right now it can't. If that storage belonged to the accessory suite, then it would be included in that accessory suite. The planner would have to verify that. We often block them off, use them as unbuildable space otherwise, but you know, I don't think it's going to be, it would be too small, if anything, for some people. But
okay. Thank you for the clarification. Ms. Johnson?
Yeah, through the chair, yeah, defining, I noted is something to discuss with the lawyer after, but having a definition for habitable area would be helpful with the carriage houses. So these are types of questions that I'll work through with legal counsel, just to ensure that the intent of the bylaws is clear, and that the intent is habitable living space is the 90 square meters. So situations like that, you might have an area that is not habitable space, but how we define it, this will be discussed with legal counsel and building department and be brought forward in a refined version with the bylaw. Yeah,
Okay.
good questions.
Okay, that helps to clarify. So aesthetically or architecturally, it would be probably in line with the original garage, but in fact, the actual living space would be restricted by the builder. Yeah, okay, I see. Thank you for that. Anybody else?
I think it was just pointed out that the bylaw does speak to 4 boarders per home, and I have, as many other people have noticed and was referenced in earlier comments, we've got a rise of boarding houses in Metchosin by people who are renting them out as single room occupancy, and at this point it's not enforceable. And I just put that out there of how we're going to deal with that or raise education about it, because it is creating parking issues all over Metchosin Road and in other neighborhoods. And related to that, just looking at the definition of secondary suite, it does not define its use as being a single family dwelling. And I just wonder if that leaves it open to the potential to have multiple boarders or a family.
Okay. Councillor Gray.
And I think that's covered in the motion, that the planner was going to look at the question of family and how that all integrated. So that's great comments. Appreciate that.
Okay.
One point though that comes to rise with, I think, each of the comments is that we should be careful that what we're doing here is creating enforceable bylaws, not just bylaws to do stuff. we need to have the ability to be able to come back and see whether or not something's legal or not. And that may be with regard to, for example, the two-door garage. There's uninhabitable space. How's that addressed? How do we enforce that? You know, if the laws are meant to mean something, we should figure out as maybe it's part of that legal discussion the planner will have, which is to sort out are the things in here that we've set ourselves up for improper use.
Okay, so no other comments. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's comments and concerns for our planner. Then I'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilor Gray, second by Councilor Shuken. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everybody.